Hello, Fidelbogen here. To my fellow workers in the vineyard worldwide, greetings. The title of today's talk is Notes Toward an Efficient Political Worldview. This is the first part of a two-part video. The text in its entirety was originally posted on the counter-feminist blog on 12 April 2008. In this article, the sector system, as a method of constructing our operations against feminism, was unveiled for the very first time. Very well. The will to oppose feminism and its damaging consequences operates in varied and fragmentary fashion across the social landscape. This movement, if I may so term it, is lacking in cohesion, both in point of ideology and in point of political strategy, to say nothing of actual lobbying machinery or practical organization on the street. It resembles a disjointed rabble of separate and distinct mobs, often at cross purposes, armed with staves, pitchforks, and poorly articulated anger. Briefly, a peasant rebellion. Hence, our movement is no movement at all, but a plurality of motions whose aggregate total amounts to a sloshing chaos. This condition puts us at a disadvantage, and not chiefly because it is inefficient of itself, but rather because it offers our enemies a compromising spectacle which they are only too happy to turn against us in their propaganda. I have said it before, our movement is a broad demographic uprising among a disaffected population. To call it a movement whatsoever is a linguistic convenience, a manner of speaking, a way to circumvent clumsy circumlocution. Yet our enemies want very much to proclaim this thing of ours as a movement in some orthodox sense of the term. That is quite to their advantage, for it simplifies matters and sets their side in a stronger attack posture by making our side look amenable to customary formulae, easier to deal with and easier to discredit. The so-called men's movement is paradoxical because it both is and is not monolithic. Every kind of person, man and woman alike, is active within this socio-cultural fermentation. I say every kind of person, and that embraces the complete moral spectrum of human nature. But apart from being monolithically human, there is nothing monolithic about the moral spectrum of human nature. What is significantly monolithic about our so-called movement is that for all of its multiplexity, it nonetheless unites upon the anchorage point of shared opposition to feminism and to its damaging consequences, whether this opposition be openly articulated as manifestos or complicitly manifested as a deep-seated aversion to something unnamed yet profoundly anti-natural. Hence, if we seek unity, it is already ours. Opposition to feminism combines our energy at the root of our endeavor. This does not yet make us collectively a movement, but it does make us a community of shared intention, which is a foundation not to be neglected, since for want of it nothing further could be built. Yet bear in mind that our shared intention is only a foundation. And why? Because intention alone, like anything else, is stationary until it is joined to motion. And in the present case, our shared intention joins severally to such a disunity of motions, or proposed motions, that it does not form the animating principle for any shared motion across the board. Meaning, the kind of motion that would coherently define a movement in the political sense. Hence, it is a foundation only for a ragtag horde of unrelated motions, and being stationary across the board can serve only as a grouping device, like a fenced field. However, it is precisely our lack of unity in motion which our enemies would work to our detriment, and not through the customary game of divide and conquer, but through slanderous imputation on the basis of a wrong assumption. The case is this, that no so-called activist speaks for the movement, because there is no movement. That very point is precisely the wrong assumption, that a movement exists. But our enemies seem not to have cognized this, and they are forever casting about for some imaginary official voice of the movement, so that they can hold all of the so-called movement accountable for any indiscreet utterances this so-called voice might make, or be interpreted to have made. But again, there is no movement, only scattered motion in scattered modules. And while these modules may or may not converse to some degree, they share very little common directive, and hence no unity of accountability. The lack of unity in motion means there is no horizontal transmission belt that would distribute such accountability across the modules. This thing of ours, it is merely a growing fermentation of disaffection, joined to an evolving consensus about the objective nature of the difficulty. But once again, it embraces the moral spectrum of human nature, which, let it be remembered, is sometimes commendable and other times otherwise. But the fact remains that nobody, commendable or otherwise, enjoys being trodden on, and the more so if they have committed no certifiable offense that would justify such treatment. And when a targeted population, in this case a birth group equal to half the human race, is subjected to such treatment arbitrarily on a systemic skew, it should come as no surprise that this group will manifest displeasure in many ways, and when it does, some of the action at times will be blameworthy, or even downright evil. Truly, we are confronting the full spectrum of human nature here. There is no doubt the world contains all manner of men, and you mustn't expect all of them to react morally when they are immorally treated, although quite a few of them might struggle heroically to do so. So, the unity of our cause inheres in our shared opposition to feminism and to its damaging consequences. Such is the bedrock we stand upon. That alone, no more, but certainly no less. For it comes to this, that our shared opposition draws us all into a shared perimeter of operations, or, if you will, a sector. And please note that a sector is not a movement, but rather a charted space that renders movement intelligible in terms of its progressions. Given that the prefix anti is understood to mean opposition, to say that I am opposed to feminism means that I am anti-feminist. However, prior to opposition, and a necessary precondition to it, is simple negation. Hence, to declare that I am non-feminist is to assert a thing of greater latitude, greater profundity, and, as it may prove, greater utility. The term non-feminist etches a line through the middle of reality, and by so doing draws into the light of discourse a region of existential space which is not feminism. This act is decisively consequential, as I hope to show. It is, of course, a political line in the sand. That much verges on the self-evident. Yet the thing is not merely political, but in addition metaphysical. The category of non-feminism, as we understand it and would have it understood, poses a counterclaim against feminism's usurpative self-investiture of hegemonic privilege. This counterclaim operates elegantly, simply by directing attention to a quintessentially constitutive fact about feminism itself, that it both claims universality and aggressively aspires to it. We consider feminism's claim to be grandiose, and we believe that it crosses into the territory of hubris, and we consider feminism's aggressive pursuit of its claim to be pernicious. But to say that feminism claims universality, what meaning has this? It means that the partisans of feminist doctrine assert that a certain body of theory of which they are the custodians holds a legitimate sovereign right to subsume all of human life within the purview of its explanatory discourse. And to say that feminism aggressively aspires to universality, what meaning has this? It means that the partisans of feminist doctrine seek by all possible contrivance of law, pedagogy, and propaganda to advance feminism's claim into the realm of worldly fact, both within the fabric of cultural and institutional life, and within the private lives of as many private citizens as might feasibly be drawn into the moral gravity well of feminist theory. Non-feminism both bears witness to these facts about feminism and stands as a roadblock against them. The minute you say non-feminism or non-feminist, you are, so to speak, advertising a competing product and demanding a rightful share of the market for that product. Feminism, you see, not only claims a monopoly upon truth, but likewise claims a mandate to exercise unhindered political muscle on behalf of that monopoly. But the claim is spurious. The claim is a bubble. A way is needed to pop this bubble, and the simple notion of non-feminism is just the pin for the job. When the term non-feminism presents itself without explanation and yet apparently demanding respect, how can a feminist argue against it? The answer is uphill and with difficulty. Non-feminism says both a lot and not much at all. It says a lot because it surveys a lot of territory, but it says not much because we are not told much about what that territory contains. We are told only that it does not contain feminism. But to a feminist, such negative presentation offers a slippery wall with no grappling points. There is nothing positive to be asserted against non-feminism simply because the term itself asserts nothing positive in the first place. Moreover, the term itself bespeaks nothing judgmental, either good or ill, as regards feminism. It bespeaks only alterity. Non-feminism says nothing about itself other than to assert its otherness. It says to the feminist, "You are feminism and I am not." That is all it says. Yet this deceptively simple message sets a burden of proof upon the feminist in perpetuity to establish feminism as inherently more desirable than a lack of feminism, or inherently more entitled to cultural sovereignty. Simply stated, non-feminism places feminism permanently on the defensive, by default, and it does this masterfully without assuming any aggressive posture. Non-feminism is not a person, not an organization, not an ideology, not a doctrine, and above all, not a movement. Non-feminism is simply the universe exclusive of feminism, and that is a portion of the cosmos greater than 99%. Therefore, non-feminism need not and cannot answer for itself. How can 99% of the universe answer for itself? What in heaven's name could such an action possibly entail? No, only persons, organizations, ideologies, doctrines, and so-called political movements need to answer for themselves, because only entities such as those are constricted enough to embody the possibility of transgression. Those who speak on behalf of feminism cannot hope to gain the initiative against non-feminism without first making it clear why the rest of the universe ought to be filled with feminism, or interpreted by feminism, or overshadowed by feminism, or by whatever means brought under the scepter of feminism's imperium. Tersely stated, feminism must first explain itself. And regrettably, self-explanation is a posture of weakness because it differs by merely a shade from self-justification. And self-justification is a defensive posture. Thus, to be under obligation of explaining yourself is ipso facto to be on the defensive. It is the thief who must explain himself. The magistrate need not. It is the courtier who must explain himself. The king need not. So, if you simply declare yourself non-feminist, Others have no warrant to interrogate you in quest of further particulars. Your non-participation in feminism, your non-alignment in the polarity of its discourse, your cavalier refusal to take its issues as points of decisive personal or spiritual significance are simply not open for discussion unless you, in your own good time and at your own sovereign pleasure, feel so disposed. Still, you may foresee occasional opposition to this scheme of politesse. A customary knee-jerk response by the typical feminist foot soldier is to rattle off a list of talking points pertaining to women's issues. In the mind of the speaker, such a list passes for a definition of feminism, and the speaker wishes to drive you into a corner by suggesting that your disapproval of feminism means that you approve of glass ceilings, or the like. The talking point trick is simply a way for the speaker to talk past you and duck the genuine point at issue. I don't mean the speaker consciously goes about to do this, but the net effect comes to the same thing. The speaker presents what he or she personally believes to be feminism and utilizes this purely subjective understanding as a yardstick to measure the objective world. In this case, you. Such is the character of feminist subjectivism. Feminism is an enterprise composed of many people who have only a skewed, sketchy, or compartmentalized knowledge of what they are involved in. It is also an enterprise which privileges theory over reality and fails signally to factor the real-world results of its theories into its self-definition, preferring rather to lay blame upon the world, or upon men in particular, when things go awry. For such reasons, among others, we are not well advised to go to the feminists themselves for an account of what feminism essentially is. The feminists will only explain what feminism is supposed to be, and even those reports will vary markedly. Hence, our quest for an objective accounting must step beyond feminist subjectivism and self-description and take stock of feminism from the outside, as a phenomenon embedded in a web of ecological relations with things other than itself. Feminist subjectivism presumes that feminist ideology holds the power to explain all things, and that all things must therefore yield a right-of-way to feminist ideology. The trick works because the majority of feminists are profoundly ignorant of how feminism actually operates. This ignorance is owing to a lack of information about feminism. In other words, partial knowledge. And partial knowledge begets partiality toward a personal version of feminism, whatever the feminist speaker believes feminism to be or wishes it to be. But this personal version, being founded upon incomplete partial information about feminism, cannot gather the full scope of what feminism in total does to the non-feminist world. All the same, this partial knowledge deems itself to possess a complete understanding. Accordingly, if the non-feminist world does not conform to or defer to such understanding, then that very fact must, by the feminist reckoning, be due to intransigence on the part of the non-feminist world, and must therefore count as inculpatory evidence against that world. Now, consider that this mental proceeding is duplicated with degrees of variation in millions of feminist or feminist-influenced brains, and it becomes clear that feminist understanding is built upon a subjective platform. Signals from the non-feminist world which speak of feminism's effects upon that world would be critically informative in this connection, but such signals are not objectively processed. In sum, if you wish to know what real feminism is, you could as well ask a non-feminist as a feminist. To ask a feminist about feminism is useful if you wish to put feminism on the defensive by forcing it to explain itself. But if you seek pragmatically useful knowledge about feminism as a phenomenon, you should commence your investigation in the border region of feminism's impact upon the larger world, and only much later convene your court of inquiry with the individual feminist. So once more, it is feminism's responsibility to justify itself to the non-feminist world, continually and repeatedly if need be, and even until hell freezes over. Feminism is not equivalent to a natural law, such as, for example, gravity, which operates with suprahuman compulsion. One cannot argue with a natural law or expect a natural law to justify itself. But as concerns feminism, the case stands rather differently. Feminism is very much a human artifice. It is contrived by humans and imposed by human methods upon other humans, who in theory might not take such imposition kindly, and therefore ought first to be consulted. In the future, we may expect to block feminist subjectivism by an arsenal of methods whose ingenuity will grow in proportion to our research and development efforts. This is to suggest where our study energy should be directed. Part 2 of this article will follow in the next video. Fidelbogen. Out, 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 out.